I miss this outfit. I'll find an excuse to wear it again. Hey, folks. So, this will be my picks for the top 10 12th Doctor episodes. It's kind of the end of an era in a couple ways. I should address this up front instead of waiting for the back end. More than a few people have asked whether or not Take Two Doctor Who reviews are going to continue into the 13th Doctor's era with Series 11, Series 12. So here's my current plan for that. Series 11 is definitely going to happen at some point this year, but not immediately. I actually need to take a break from the Wednesday uploads and go to one video a week, at least for a little bit, to try and get my feedback under me. Getting the book out, well, it's not out yet, but getting the book ready to get out has just set me behind. I used to have a cushion of stuff shot in advance, and I really don't right now. So I need to rebuild all that a little bit. But at some point down the line, month, maybe two, I will do Take Two reviews for Series 11. Series 12 is probably going to wait until after Series 13 airs, most likely, because honestly, it's too fresh. It's the freshest stuff in my head, and I don't think I'm going to have a new enough take. I don't think it's been enough time. But they will all happen eventually. But that's the plan for right now. So, that having been said, let us take a look at what I think are the 10 best episodes to star Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor. Number 10, The Pilot. This is easily my favorite start to any of the series that he's in. I think it does such a wonderful job setting up the Doctor's current status quo, establishing Bill, establishing what it is about her that sort of draws the Doctor to her, makes her interested. In general, I still love the idea and the setup of the Doctor teaching at a university. I just love that on principle. And I like the way it gets established. I like the way that the story pans out. And while I do have some reservations about some of the aspects of how Heather is handled, I do think the way that she pursues them is actually very tense and very well done. The resolution is an interesting one, and it kind of sets up a lot of what's going to go on the rest of that series with, rather than needing a violent to this thing must be stopped solution, it's more about acts of kindness and empathy. And that's laying a lot of groundwork for what was ultimately, I think, a great series. Number 9, Dark Water and Death in Heaven. So this is a reminder that when I do lists like this, I do count two-parters as one story. And I suspect this is going to be one of the more controversial entries, because I know plenty of people whose opinions I respect who really, really don't like this story. I do. I'm not going to say that a lot of the criticisms I've heard toward it aren't valid, but between the fact that it's technically not the introduction to Missy, but I consider it to be the introduction to Missy because it's when she actually becomes a character instead of a mystery box. And I really love Michelle Gomez in this part. I love the answers that it gives to the questions the Doctor has been asking about himself for that entire series. Questions of, am I a good man? And his answer and the affirmation of who he is and being comfortable with his place in the universe.
I am an idiot with a box and a screwdriver.
I think it is wonderful. I think the use of the Cybermen's pretty interesting in this as well. I personally like the resolution on Danny and Clara's relationship. I like Danny more than I think some people do. But for me, while there are some weaknesses here, the stuff that I like about it more than makes up for it. I thought this was a really solid closure to that first series that Capaldi had and set up things well for where his journey would go later. Number 8, Thin Ice. This is one that really got boosted quite a bit in my reassessment of it when I did the rewatch. Really just sort of seeing how well everything just kind of pulls together. Again, in terms of the thematics and a lot of the recurring stuff across the series with its examination and its criticism of capitalism and the kind of behavior that motivates. I love the fact that the villain is just a guy, just a normal guy taking advantage. There is an alien involved, but the alien's not the problem. The greedy human is. The way that we get to see that era of England portrayed just felt fresh, despite it not really being a new time setting for the Doctor. The way the Doctor and Bill interact when the episode kills a child, so like, okay. And then Bill confronting him about that, like, how often do you see this kind of thing? Like, what is your life really like? What have you not been telling me? And watching the two of them come to a slightly better understanding about who they are. And plus, the Doctor saying, oh, words are the better way, and then just decking a racist in the face. I support that. Number 7, Under the Lake and Before the Flood. This is another really terrific two-parter. The atmosphere is mwah.
I want to kiss it to death.
It does a really good build-up between introducing the ghosts and the way they operate and trying to figure out how this works. And it doesn't waste a lot of time like pretending, ooh, is it really ghosts? Like, well, we know it's something else. Let's try and figure out what. And building the mystery around what are they, as opposed to trying to play it like a surprise that it's going to somehow involve aliens. Because we all know that at this point. We know that's going to be the case. So it does a really wonderful job playing with that progression and the timing and the pacing at which both the characters and the audience learn more about it. There's terrifically tense scenes, like when the sort of head of the team, she's walking along and there's this ghost dragging an axe behind her and she can't hear it. Super tense. I know some people probably would have put this one a little bit higher. For me, there are a couple of weird oddities in terms of like the way the second one opens. The Fisher King looks great, but when he gets out in daylight, doesn't look as good as I would like him to. And there's little things like that holding it back, but this really is terrific stuff. Number 6, Face the Raven. Now, some people would lump this as a 3-part story. This, Heaven Sent, Hellbent. I don't. I actually consider them separate stories. Each is a sequel to the one before, but it's not a continuous single story. It is a complete story in each episode that then sets up where the next one's going to go. And I think Face the Raven was a really excellent sign-off for Clara. It would get undone 2 episodes later, but within the episode itself, especially with the build-up over that series and her just getting too comfortable, getting cocky, trying to be like the Doctor, and that behavior getting her killed. And the Doctor, who is so certain that he can handle almost anything, and there's nothing he can do this time. And it would have been really easy for her death to feel overblown and maudlin, and maybe it even should, but for some reason it works. I think they managed to find the balance of it really, really well. And while it's a little underutilized, I do find the concept of the trap street actually quite interesting as well. So that was a nice little extra layer on top of it. Plus, I just like ravens. I do. Yeah, that's a factor. Number 5, Extremists. This episode, based on premise, should not work. It should not work at all. But there's so many things that pull it together. First of all, props to the show for having extended consequences to the fact that the Doctor lost his eyesight the previous episode, and he's still dealing with the consequences of that. The fact that his workarounds aren't actually perfect, and he's still coming up short in ways, relying on the sunglasses. And it doesn't totally work, but it gets him by well enough until certain situations where it's like, oh God, I actually need my actual eyes. The introductions of the monks is very creepy, while the follow-up 2-parter with the monks, I know they call it the Monk Trilogy, but again, I consider this one self-contained that just sets up the next ones. That introduction of them, the idea of them running these simulations so that they know exactly what to do, when to arrive, and how to behave to take over a planet without firing a shot. That entire concept is great. I love the triumph of the Doctor, who isn't even the Doctor. He's just a program, and he has lost in the sense that, like, he can't save the world. It's not his world to save. It's all fake. But still has that triumphant moment of sending the information to the real Doctor, the smirk, and just, like, the execution of the reveal that this is all a simulation, because that's the part that really should have fallen apart. Because it's an equivalent to, it was all a dream, and, like, is there anything worse and more cliche than that? But it works. It makes it work, and it sells it really well. Number 4, Oxygen. This one is a beautiful piece of science fiction, and I mean that in multiple ways. The use of the space setting and the use of the threat of running out of air is the kind of thing that you need a space and sci-fi setting to do. I always love when things happen within a piece of genre fiction that you couldn't do in another genre. If you moved it to another genre, you wouldn't be able to tell the same story. And the use of oxygen, just the lack of it as a threat in this environment, that it could be just taken away at a moment. And then the other thing that it does, which in my mind, any sci-fi that is intending to make a commentary on the modern world, which most sci-fi should, anything that is meant to be taking place in the future of the world in which we live now should have some kind of commentary element. The best way to do that right is to take an aspect of right now, blow it up to extreme proportions, and this does that with capitalism and the treatment of employees by a corporation who views them as nothing other than a number, other than an asset, other than data in a spreadsheet, and does not ever consider them as human beings. It is a terrific and biting commentary, and the exact kind of extrapolation and extreme example of something that, to a lesser degree, does occur in the world that we live. That is how you do this kind of thing right. It's tense. It really does get under your skin at points, tense you up, and just be like, this is so wrong and so unfair. And it really pulls this off. Number 3, The Mummy on the Orient Express. One of the dumbest titles for one of the best episodes. There's almost too much to love about this. I love the blending of this more classical looking set, because it's modeled after the Orient Express, yet it's in space, and we have all these sci-fi elements. So I love the mix of aesthetics right there. The supporting cast on this one is great. I really do appreciate when a Doctor Who episode has a strong supporting cast who all feel like proper characters with their own lives separate from the story they're currently trapped in. This has that in abundance. The whole conceit of the timer and having it there, watching it count down every time it comes up, and so that the scene's playing out in real time, that is really, really wonderfully done. It's so tense. And again, this is one of the early examples that I think really nails that the Doctor defeats this thing through understanding, through coming to realize what it is and meeting it on its own terms. This isn't something you fight. This is something that you understand and empathize with, and in his case, give permission to stop. So good. Number 2, Heaven Sent. Oh, yeah, I am sure that I've surprised some people by not making this number 1. We'll get there. Hold on. But this is a freaking masterpiece. The ability of Capaldi to hold the screen while being the only one there, trapped in this horrible maze with this thing just creeping behind him slowly all the time, him trying to figure out what's going on, the audience trying to figure out with him, the slow sinking realization of what it is that is happening to him and how long it has been happening to him, to then turn around and become one of the most triumphant moments I've ever seen on television when you realize that he's getting further into this story about the bird every time he tells it, and that means he is chipping away at the thing that has trapped him. And I personally choose to read this as a metaphor for grief. I think it works excellently as that. Other people have different reads on it, but I think the triumph of that moment stands no matter what your read on this is. Whatever you think it is that is trapping him here, that won't let him escape, he can break it down, but it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It takes time. It takes work. It feels like you are just punching a wall of diamond. But if you put in the work, you can break out of whatever it is that has trapped you within a cycle of pain. That is beautiful. It doesn't take my number one, though. Because number one is World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. Now, if I were to break down this two-parter and Heaven Sent, I probably have more tiny notes to give on this two-parter. By most, I say objective, not really, but at least semi-objective measures, Heaven Sent is a better story. But it doesn't take my number one, because this wrap-up in this story, especially at the end of The Doctor Falls, before setting up Twice Upon a Time, but prior to that, it pulls together everything that I love about the 12th Doctor. If you haven't watched it already, this past Saturday, I did a video explaining why the Doctor's character arc over his 3 series resonates so tightly and directly and deeply with me. And this story is what pulls all of that together. If this hadn't nailed the giving the exact definition and feeling and motivation behind this Doctor, his appreciation of who he has become, his reluctance to let that go.
I don't want to change again. Never again!
If this didn't have all that on display, I don't know if that arc that I love so much would be as strong. What makes that arc work is how it all pulls together in this ending here. And without this, I don't know if Capaldi would still be my favorite Doctor. But with this, without the story itself being perfect, because it's not, but whatever little things I have that I might nitpick about it or that I brought up in the Take Two reviews, it pulls everything about him that I love together in a perfect summation of why I love this Doctor.
I do what I do because it's right! Because it's decent! And above all, it's kind!
And I cannot do anything other than give that the top spot, because this is the story that solidifies him as my Doctor, my favorite incarnation of this character. And that's even without getting into all the amazing, tense, scary, triumphant, sad stuff that goes on over the story, from what happens to Bill and the slow realization of exactly how horrifying the conversion into a Cyberman, especially these early clunky versions of Cyberman, actually is, to the fact that the Doctor realizes he cannot actually fix this, even though he said that he couldn't. He believed it when he said it. Missy and the Master, and Missy making a decision, and an older version of herself that refuses to accept that she changed and evolved, rather kill her than let it happen, while the Doctor has fully embraced who he has become and is willing to die for it. It all just works. That's why it's my pick for the 12th Doctor's best story. What is your top 10 for Capaldi's era? Whatever it is, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. I have a Patreon. You'll see a link up there. That is how I make my living and how I'm able to do all this. But even if you're not able to contribute there are rewards for every tier. But even if you can't, there's YouTube memberships as an option. But even if you can't do that, like, share, subscribe, all of those help me out. But I don't want to put too much pressure on you even for that. Because at the end of the day, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.